Wow, I am really excited about today's video for a couple of reasons. Number one is we have a Kyosho vehicle here on the channel. It's been like since 2011 since we last had a Kyosho vehicle here, and I'm really excited about this particular vehicle because it is the Ultima from the new Vintage series line. Now, I always wanted an Ultima. When I was young, my second vehicle was a Turbo Scorpion. My third vehicle was a Turbo Ultima, but I never had an Ultima. I always wanted it. I just thought it looked so cool. And finally, I have one in my hands and I get to share it with you guys. So let's head over to the workbench. I'll tell you about all the details and of course we'll go drive it later. Okay, whether you have a history in RC or you're new to RC, you are going to have a great experience with this kit. Now, it is a full build up kit, yet when you get it, it's just a box of parts. And I really like that Kyosho kicked it back to the old school style of packaging where they had the blister packs in there so you could see some of the feature parts that are in the kit. And you know, they've got the body separate, they've got some of the drivetrain parts in the blister packs and everything. It was just cool to get back to the original experience of building a Kyosho kit and seeing all that stuff. I remember looking at that stuff before I'd build it. Pretty awesome. But like I said, it's a full build-up kit. It's going to take you a little while to get it together, and the instructions in the kit are fantastic. Now, let's take a look at the body here. It's basically a similar body to the original. In fact, pretty much everything on here is similar to the original. It's not a back pour of the old kit. They've redesigned this kit basically from the ground up, so it gives you that vintage experience. However, it's got, you know, all the modern tech that you want on here for a great handling buggy, and a buggy that's going to be able to take the new electronics that we have today, like a brushless system. But back to the body here, really cool look to it. Basically, you could spray this thing white and use a Sharpie marker and detail it if you want to and have a really good look to it. They give you all the decals in the kit, and what I really like about the decals here is they went and die cut them all. So you just peel them off, no cutting with a X-Acto knife, and you can just stick them right on, and it looks really cool. I went the extra mile here and painted the driver figure on the inside. He's a little bit more to scale now in the body. I think the old guy was a little bit larger inside the cockpit, but anyway, the roll cage here is a molded cage just like we had in the past, and we even got this aluminum roof skid on top. And you screw it all together. It looks very cool. The other big change here is they have a nylon wing in the back. It's this nice strong nylon plastic versus the old Lexan wing that would shatter after you would roll it over a bunch of times. There's a number of body clips holding it in place, and actually it's a little bit of work to get the body off of this thing, to get it off these pegs. Luckily, just like the old kit, the battery slides in from the side, and once you have the body on, you really don't need to take it off unless you're going to do some major work to it. But again, that is just a very cool look. While we're talking about some of the exterior features, why don't I talk about the wheels and tires on here. So we have the Sand Super rib tires up front. These look pretty much like the old tire. I see a yellow dot on there, so that's the rubber compound. But it's got that vintage look to it. The rear, on the other hand, they did go and change this up. This is a more of a modern spike type of tire. On the vintage kit, they had a larger lug tire. So I think this is going to go and grip a lot better on today's surfaces if you're going to a track with it. And then the wheels on here. So it's kind of the turbo dish wheel, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm making that up. It's got a cool dish with a directional vane in there. And the rear is a 12mm hex, and the front is a ball bearing setup. So it's not like most modern setups today where you have a 12mm hex up front. We've got the bearings in the wheels on this. And that's pretty much it for the exterior features. We got the plastic bumper up front. I think the old one had a Kyosho logo on it, if I remember correctly. I tried to do a lot of remembering throughout this video, but on the back, we do have a motor guard, and that, I believe, was an option before, so that's pretty nice. But why don't I go and take the body off of this? It's going to take me a few minutes, and then we'll take a look at all the stuff going on inside the buggy. All right, so let's start off talking about the front of the vehicle, and the first thing that draws my attention here is these new 12mm shocks. Nice aluminum red anodized shock, gives you that vintage look. What's pretty interesting here is the cartridge. Now, it's an aluminum cartridge, which is pretty cool. Dual O-ring on the inside. And when I was putting it together, it was a little odd because there was no clip to like hold the O-rings together. Basically, when you screw the cartridge in place, there's a little plate on the top, a plastic plate that secures those O-rings into the cartridge. That was pretty neat. There's also a little plastic gasket that goes around the bottom to make sure it doesn't leak. And that was a little tough to get those on. But once it was together, no leaks so far, so that's pretty cool. And you can go and adjust the pistons. They give you some extra pistons in the kit if you want to go and tune the vehicle. But it's got a really nice feel to it. And, you know, it's got a great look, of course. We've got the red plastics on there. Yeah, it is the clamp to secure the spring on the top, and it takes a little while to set those properly. But again, it's got that vintage look to it. And same with the rear. The rear shocks are pretty much just like the front, just longer now. If I remember correctly, the original shocks were much shorter, and now we've got some nice long travel. And the suspension just feels really good on this. I like how it feels. I built everything with 30-way oil while I was working on the kit. But the shocks are now mounted to a composite shock tower, and it's not just a flat plate piece of plastic. They do have some webbing behind it to make it a nice sturdy shock tower. It's a pretty nice composite plastic that they use. The original kit did have aluminum, but this seems to work pretty well. Maybe they'll have a option aluminum shock tower for it. I know they have a number of options for it. I haven't checked them all out yet. Onto the bulkhead, looks very similar to the original. It looks pretty close. Looks like we have a sway bar mount option in there. And then onto the arms, these do look like they've been revised from the original, a little bit more aerodynamic, but still has the same geometry that worked really well. And, you know, it does have a little ball on the outside, so you can put the sway bar on there, but there are some tuning options for the lower mount as well. And on the outside, these look very close to the original caster blocks and steering spindles that were on the original kit. Just in a really nice plastic now, and it's really firm, so it's not like some you know, flexible plastic here. They didn't go and skimp, I don't think, anywhere on this kit. It's got a really good feel to it. The upper camber links, they're just a threaded rod, so you can go and adjust them if you want to. You got to take it off and twist to you know, basically adjust the camber. Same with the steering rods, but it is adjustable. It kind of kicks it back to that vintage style tie rod that was on the kit. All right, now moving back to the chassis. No, let's move back to the rear suspension since we're talking suspension. And just like in the front, we now have a composite tower in the rear. Again, those long shocks. And then the vintage Ultima arms, basically just slightly revised for the, you know, this particular kit, but it still has that Ultima arm look to it. Really like that. On the outside, however, they do have a new rear hub on here. It kind of looks like the old rear hub. However, it now has inserts in there, so you can adjust the toe. So I believe there's 3 inserts in the kit in total, and you could go and adjust your rear toe if you want to. On the inside is basically that triangular rear pivot plate that we saw on the original kit. It's got the 3mm pins on there. There is a washer, so you can go space the arm forward and back, and then it mates up with the rear bulkhead, which has a very similar look to the original bulkhead. So I like how they just kept it true to the original vehicle and just kind of modernized everything. It looks really nice. Now, the one thing that they did go and keep old school was the hinge pins. It does have E-clips on there, and yes, a couple did go flying on me, but I found them all. I think the hinge pin groove is a little too shallow, actually. I think it should just be a little bit deeper to fit those E-clips a little bit better. But anyway, you guys who haven't experienced E-clips before, you're going to have a lot of fun snapping those things on. All right, let's move on to the chassis now. So this is a 6061 chassis. It is the stamped monocoque style of chassis that we saw on the Ultima before. Basically this bright aluminum, you know, natural finish, and looks really cool. Everything's countersunk on the bottom, so no screws are protruding that get hung up on everything. And then the top plate is a composite plastic top plate. And if I remember correctly, the original was fiberglass. Feel free to correct me on any of this stuff, you guys that have been around RC for a while. You know, I didn't have the Ultima. Just trying to remember what everything was about when I did want one. But it's a pretty effective top plate. We've got our body mount on top. We've got the body mounts back here. And there's actually a mount, so you can go and mount a fan for the speed controller that you mount underneath the top plate here. Now, this chassis does feel nice and rigid. Basically, no flex there. It's stamped. It's even got the grooves on the bottom. We've got kick up in the front. And just really nice. Now, the battery area does fit pretty much every modern battery today. You can go and put a hard case pack in here, a rectangular hard case pack. It does fit. I did go with a shotgun style LiPo battery here from Reedy. Basically just wanted to give it that vintage look to it, even though I've got modern electronics in here. What I really like now is we've got hook and loop Velcro to secure the pack in place. In the past, with at least with my Turbo Ultima and then the original Ultima, we had zip ties there, and you had to reuse the zip ties all the time. There's these little plates that secure the Velcro straps so they don't slide off. You put those on, and it looks really cool. I like the look of it. Now, the other big change is the transmission. Kind of has a similar look to the original, but it's much more modern. It's got to handle modern power plants. And let's start off with the differential in here. So we've got an all-metal gear differential on the inside, and it's actually sealed, so you can go and put different weight oils in there. I went with a 4,000 weight oil to start with. Just dipped into my box of racing oils and put some silicone oil in there. All ball bearings throughout the transmission, and pretty much every gear inside the transmission is all metal, except for the spur gear. They have a nice composite spur gear in there. So again, really quality setup inside the transmission. So you want to go throw your vintage, low turn motors in there, that's totally cool. Or if you want to go put a brushless system in there, it will work with that as well. They also went and added a slipper clutch to it. You can go and adjust the slipper from the outside here. The slipper pads are located on the other side where the main gear comes out of the transmission. The only thing they don't have is they don't have that little cap on the top. I always like popping that cap off and looking at the gears on the inside just to check them out. It's not there on this one, but oh well. They even go and give you the pinion gear. Again, ball bearings on the outside for the spur gear to ride on, and then everything is covered up with this classic gear cover. It even has the little body clip to hold it in. On the inside, it's got the little rubber O-ring to keep the spur gear in place when you do pop the cover off, and the cover does have the foam liner on the outside to keep dust out of it. Now, you probably, as I mentioned before, we do have the metal motor plate in the back now, and the brace for that. We've got this little plastic cage in the back here that mates up with the body, and then there are new wing mounts on there. Since we have a new wing on there, they actually give you two sets of wing mounts. So there's a low set and a high set, and there's just a little clip on the back, or a little mount on the back with body clips. So you go and snap that into place and then slide the body clips in, and it's fairly easy to access everything. And that pretty much wraps up the drivetrain details. Like I said, I did go and put some modern electronics in here. So I actually have a low profile servo up front, and they give you two tie rods. The original, I think you had to go and bend the tie rod depending on the size of servo you had in there, but they give you a bent tie rod already if you have a standard size servo, and then a straight tie rod if you use a low profile servo. Just be aware of your servo mounts. Depending on your servo, you may have to reorient them for the positioning, just so everything lines up properly. They give you plastic servo arms with a number of different teeth. And then the steering on this, pretty much similar to the original. So we've got a twin crank system. The left side over here does have a servo saver built into it, so you could go and adjust the spring tension with the servo nut on there, and then it's your vintage style of crank setup. There is an aluminum Ackerman bar in the center, which I really like that. They've got bronze bushings in there, so it rocks back and forth nice and free. Again, we've got those adjustable tie rods on there, and then steel pivot balls in the ball end, so I like that as well. They didn't go with a plastic ball end there. We've got hex hardware throughout. I did go with, let me go back to the electronics for a second. I did go with a Tekin RS brushless electronic speed controller in here. I've got a Gen 3 17.5 motor, even like the little wire guide that protects the wires in the back. That's a nice little addition that they have. Went with a Spectrum radio system to control it, and again, that's a Reedy LiPo battery that's in there, but I like this. It was an awesome build. So much fun to kind of just kick me back to building the older style of kits, and it was just really cool to see how they brought it up to today's standards, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to drive. So it's time to head out. Let's find some off-road terrain and have some fun with this vintage series Ultima. So when I drove my Turbo Ultima that I told you about back in the late 80s, it was on that same BMX track where I tested out this Ultima. And I gotta tell you, it actually brought back a lot of great memories, just kind of sliding around the dirt surface there, going over the jump in the center of the track. And that's what we did. We basically just ran the absolute center of that track. There was only one jump, and that's where my club raced. It was just a great time. And, you know, again, just this was so much fun to drive, just bringing back those memories of wanting this kit, driving a similar kit to it, and just it's been a great overall experience. I love the way this thing builds up. It was just a lot of fun, and then of course driving it, it's an absolute blast. It's basically a stock powered buggy. It was pretty quick with that 17.5 turn motor in there. The traction was actually pretty good. There was some wheel spin there. I think these tires are a lot better than those big lug tires we used to drive in the past. The front tires, however, they still have that understeer. You know, it's just kind of this flat rib, so it doesn't grab a lot of traction whether you're on dirt or if you're on asphalt. Just kind of pushes out, and you know what? It's part of the fun as well. And you know, I don't know if I would actually change it. I think I would just keep running it as is. The suspension on here, I think, is a lot better. I mean, again, I can't remember everything back to the 80s, but I can even remember what I had for breakfast this morning. But this jumped really, really well, and I had a great time just kind of launching it over some of those little bumps and getting some air time underneath it, and it landed pretty well, and I just stabbed the brakes and rip it around and come back and jump again backwards. It was just so much fun. And overall, I think it was just really easy to control. And I think maybe even a little easier than in the past. I think the changes that they made to this definitely help it out as far as bringing it up to the modern standards that we're used to. It definitely handles the power well of a stock system. What I really liked about the power, the drivetrain I should say, is that little whine you get out of the transmission from the gears. It's kind of like this little bit of a chirp sound to it. And again, it kind of just jogs those memories of the past. I definitely like the way everything is set up. I didn't really crash it a lot. I had some tumbles and stuff like that, but nothing to really test durability out. I mean, I don't think you're really going to break much on this unless you hit it into a wall or something like that. It's got the slipper clutch on there to protect the all-metal gears and the drivetrain. Again, in stock form, I don't think you're really going to encounter anything at all with it. The battery stayed in there fine. There's no leaking from the shocks or anything like that. The bottom scraped up. I kind of like I remember it, just all these scrapes all over the bottom of the aluminum. That's pretty cool. You know, out there, I took it over to the bashing field where I do a lot of other testing, and it was hitting a bunch of rocks over there. I actually cleared out a bunch of rocks in order to drive this thing. Still hit a few though, and the little rocks, they didn't cause any damage. But what was really cool over there was just kind of ripping this thing through the sand and watching the sand slide off the tires on there, fly all over the place. That was really cool. I think whoever gets one of these things, whether, you know, you have some history in the hobby and you want to kind of relive that, or, you know, you're just looking for something new, you're new to the hobby, this thing is definitely going to be enjoyable. It's really well set up. I think the quality is all there. And, you know, Kyosho, they just deliver an excellent product.